Well, hi everybody. Well, this next show is a really great show, but I wanted to preface it by saying, well, we did have some technical difficulties. There was some issues that we had with our camera equipment, and then in editing had some more issues. We recorded this a long time ago, and I wanted to put it together because I think it's still a pretty good show. It's pretty good content, and so please forgive us for our technical difficulties. The truth of it is, we dropped the film in the ocean, it corroded, we had to get all the salt out, and that's why it looks so salty. No, that's not right. But anyway, I do hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Hello, and welcome to the American Road Trip. Today we're going to head up US Route 101. It's a route that goes up from Los Angeles up the coast of California. It's actually one of the original highways in California. And we're going to be going to the Channel Islands, or actually Ventura, and we're going to be visiting the Ventura Maritime Museum, which actually is now the Channel Islands Maritime Museum. So we're going to go take a look. Come on with us and have some fun. Today, we are on our way to Ventura, California. We're going to visit Ventura County Maritime Museum. Now, this is a wonderful place, full of art, historic ships, rich in maritime history. And the area itself, Ventura, is also rich in history. Near Channel Islands, this area was developed in the 1950s and opened in 1965 by a fellow named Martin Smith. Nearby is Port Hueneme, which is the largest deepwater port from Los Angeles to San Francisco. Biggest import is automobiles. And so I'm very excited about taking a look at this place. So if you're ready, let's go. Hello everybody, here we are, and who might you be, sir?
I'm Bill Conroy, the Executive Director of the Ventura County Maritime Museum. I'm glad you're here today. We welcome visitors from all over California, all over the world for that matter, and we're open 7 days a week, 11 to 5. After you see what we have inside this museum, I'm sure you're going to want to come down with your family and enjoy it.
Okay, great. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to see today? What kind of museum is this?
Okay. As we said, it's a maritime museum. Most of our artifacts have a maritime flavor. Our artwork, which is a fantastic collection of fine art, is mostly maritime art. And then we have a really large collection of model ships. Really finely built model ships. It's going to be impressive. When you see this, I think you'll be surprised at what you'll find inside this museum.
The first painting we see is very old.
It depicts the Dutch getting ready to go off from the Netherlands to the Indies to pick up spices and that sort of thing. It was painted in 1622.
That's a little while ago.
A while ago. This is Bonaventure Peters, very well-known Dutch artist of the time. Now, the interesting thing about this painting, which was done in 1645, is that it's painted on a piece of board. That board is over 350 years old. It's not cracked or warped. I couldn't do that in my garage with a piece of board.
Just the board is 350 years old.
The whole painting, yes.
That's incredible. As we move along, they all tell a story. Here's a painting that shows Peter the Great from Russia coming to the Netherlands. If you know the history, Peter the Great spent 2 years in the Netherlands and became a master carpenter, then went home to Russia and built a fleet of ships for the Russian Navy.
Here's an interesting thing.
Tell us about this one.
Here we have a painting that was originally painted in the late 1600s. It was done by Willem van der Velde the Younger, again a very famous Dutch artist. Now you notice there's two sections.
I did. I noticed that it's divided over there. There's a left side, and looks like that side a little dark.
Good point. Good point. Exactly. Now, what happens is we're told that the left side of the painting was damaged in some way. We don't really know what that means. but another artist came along and repainted that section.
When he repainted the section, this painting was then 150 years old. So they assumed that it was probably darkened by age or the varnish had yellowed, and he was trying to match what he was seeing in the painting. Since that, in recent times, it's been clean, and the color from each artist shows through, and that's why you see the difference.
The model ships we have here represent mostly the age of sail. We don't have too many modern ships. They're mostly the sailing ships.
This particular model happens to be a very famous ship. It was a Danish ship, the Vessel. When it was built in 1628, it was very complete, with many guns, probably over 100. Very neat, as you can see. When it was launched in Stockholm, it sank. Well, it's a nice-looking ship. It looks like it should not sink.
Exactly. These are prisoner of war models from the Napoleonic Wars. Now, the period that these were built in was 1790 to 1815.
They are approximately 200 years old. The story is, during the Napoleonic Wars, Britain was fighting France. The British had captured many French sailors, and they put them into prisons in England. And at the prisons, the prisoners developed an industry to build model ships and sold them to the British people. They were very successful at it, as it turns out. Now you'll see that these model ships are white. They were made from bones, left over from their food. So some of them are made from beef bones, pork bones, and whatever they gave them to eat. So after they ate dinner, they made model ships.
This is probably a kind of ship that Louis XIV might have sailed on the Seine. The French had many galleys like this, but this is decorated to be the king's galley.
I can't help but notice this painting. It is just stunning. This tells a wonderful story. In 1672, there was a battle called the Battle of Sol Bay. It was on the east coast of England, and the British were fighting the Dutch at the time. The battle raged on for a couple of days, and it turned out to be a draw. The English went home, and the Dutch went home. This scene is not of the battle scene.
This is the scene when the English have come home. The king is coming out to review the fleet. The ship here is the king's yacht. It's Charles II at the time. Now we can see that the king has been rowed from this yacht over to this ship. We know that because his flag is flying at the mast, and see, it's been lowered on his yacht. So we know the king is aboard the ship. The gunfire, the smoke that you're seeing, salutes to the king. Interestingly enough, these two little white boats here were actually designed by King Charles II. He was quite a sailor. And if you go to Portsmouth, England, where you'll see a wonderful maritime museum, they actually have one of those boats hanging in the ceiling.
Is that right?
So a lot is going on in this painting.
Wow, that's incredible.
I can tell you that this was painted by John Dinsdale, a famous American artist, and he actually painted it by copying the original that was painted at the time of the event, and he did a wonderful job copying it. We're told that the original actually has been destroyed, and we don't know what the real story is on that, but we're lucky to have this right now.
This is the Ed Marple Collection. He was a dental technician. He had a dental office in Tucson, Arizona, and he was going to retire, and he wanted a new hobby that was as difficult as his work. So he just tried this out. He was not specifically interested in ships and models, but the first two models are made from a kit, and they are still available today. He put them together according to the instructions in the kit, and was happy and decided that this was his hobby that he was going to pursue. Now, after those two models, the rest of the models are not painted. They have a different look. He did not want to paint them, but what he did was kept the wood different, so the different wood has different looks. The first two models are made from solid wooden hulls, the kind of thing that you would find in a kit. It still takes a lot of work to make them look like this, but after that, he built the other ships like real ships. They have U-shaped frames on the inside, planks on the outside, and tiny dowels that hold the planks to the frames.
This particular ship had a very interesting demise, if you will. It was in Portsmouth Harbor in England, and it was getting ready to go to the Mediterranean. They were loading it. There were all kinds of people on board fixing this and fixing that. There was a small leak below the waterline, and you can't see that, but there was a pipe down there that would take seawater in. They would use a pump and pump seawater in to wash the decks off.
Okay.
Now, there was a small leak around where that pipe went into the hull, and the carpenter wanted to fix it. So what they did, they didn't want to go back to the dock. They were anchored in the harbor. They took the guns on the port side, on the far side, and put them all the way out, and they took the guns on the starboard side and put them into the middle of the ship, the center of the ship, and the ship heeled over so that this pipe was out of the water. And the carpenter went down, and he was working on this leak. The weather got a little bit, not rough, but a little more water moving around. It started coming in the gun ports on the far side. And in almost no time at all, the ship sank, and 1,000 people were killed.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
it was quite a disaster.
Oh my goodness.
This was in 1782. Okay, so what happened was, it's a great story. On the port side, there was a ship tied up to it, unloading rum, and because that it was obviously a small ship, but because of that, they figured the ship started to go down, and it kind of settled straight down and just sat on the bottom. Now, the water in Portsmouth Harbor at that point was shallow compared to the ship, so the masts and the bowsprit were actually sticking up out of the water. For many, many years, it was it's a problem for navigating the harbor. This was always in the way, and it was in the 1840s, quite a ways after this disaster, that people got to the point where they could actually do a little bit of diving. And so the fishermen in the area contracted with some divers to go down and break it up and get it out of the way, because they're fishing net catching on it all the time. And so they did that, and this was also the time when they did that, they found another ship called the Mary Rose. And the Mary Rose is a ship from the days of King Henry VIII. It's a much older ship, but that's another ship like the Vasa from Sweden that was brought up out of the water, and it's in a museum in Portsmouth.
Wow.
So great stuff.
So while they were trying to salvage this one, they found another one.
This was long past salvage, but they were just cleaning up the bottom, so it wouldn't.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Where the Mary Rose, it turns out that almost half of the ship is still intact.
Really?
Yeah. And when you see it, it's more than half the ship. It comes all the way down one side and a little ways past the center of the keel and up a little bit.
Now this is a famous ship. It's the Sovereign of the Seas, and King Charles I had this built. Now the ship itself would have cost about 10,000 pounds in the days of 1637. It turns out that the ship cost 10 times that amount because of all the gold and the carving that was put on it. Now during the reign of King Charles, there was a revolution, and he was killed by the revolutionaries.
This tends to be one of the reasons. He taxed the people and built a golden ship. So it's a beautiful ship. It's a 100 gun ship. Oh, and it's probably one of the first 100-gun ships ever built.
Really?
For 1637, as you mentioned. Now, during that time, again, the British were fighting the Dutch, and this was a very successful fighting ship. Were very much afraid of this ship. If they would try to stay away from it. They called it the Black Devil. I think partially because of all the black on the side that comes in with the gold there.
When they built these ships in England and in Holland, and did they make a lot of the same kind of ship, or was each ship its own individual look, its own individual type? For example, this one has all the gold. Were there any other ships that were just like this but without the gold?
It turns out that as time went on, in this age, they were probably quite different. But as time went on, let's say we get up to the late 1700s, maybe earlier than that, ships get very standardized. We open the books and they say, okay, if you're going to build a 74-gun ship, this is the size of the mast. This is how wide the beam is. And every piece is proportional to the other pieces. And then if you're going to build a larger ship, the same would start. So they did standardize at one point. But earlier on, they were probably more unique. Very interesting item, especially for our education program for our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. This is a Fresnel lens. It's like a lighthouse lens. And the purpose of these lenses, they were invented to take a small light source and convert it into a strong beam. Now, look at that light that you're seeing there and consider how large the light bulb is inside that lens.
Law Janelle was a ship that was aground right next to the local port here of Port Hueneme in April of 1970. The Law Janelle was a large commercial ship built in 1931 and was a troop transport in World War II. The owners were trying to sell it in 1970 and was anchored right off the coast, and a big storm came along and pushed it onto the beach, and it laid over on the beach and filled up with sand, and they were never able to rescue it from the beach. For many months, people were sneaking aboard and salvaging parts, and it was quite the activity for young people in the area. Eventually, they cut it up into large pieces, took it to the sea, and sank it. But the side of the ship is still embedded in the breakwater. If you go to Silver Strand Beach just south of here, at the far side of the beach, you can actually see the side of the ship still in the breakwater. Well, that's our show. Thanks for joining us. And if you'd like to support our channel, please visit us on Patreon. Join us next time. See you down the road.